welcome to everyone here today, and keeping in practice with the speedy meeting that we had last time, we're going to try and break the record. But someone did point out to me that Gary was here, so I think I'm probably fighting a losing battle there.
Also, there is a paper on speed limits.
This is true, Gary. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. Keep it down. Okay, councillors, we have firstly apologies. I have apologies from Deputy Mayor Gallagher, Councillor Pascoe for absence, Mayor King and Councillor O'Leary for lateness, and Councillor Southgate is leaving early for a short period or something.
Meeting.
Oh, well, okay.
I might be able to just
good
go.
Point. Okay, so I'll move those apologies be accepted, seconded by Siggy, thanks. Now, those in favour, against, carried. Just as far as confirming the agenda goes, item 8 we have deleted from this agenda because the NZTA who were booked and ready to come on Friday found out that the people who were coming here were required to attend a meeting in Waihi with Assistant Transport Minister or Associate Transport Minister Julianne Genter, and were required to be there first. And in order to have Parakawhia McLean's replacement here, I thought it was better to wait until the next meeting. So we've gone ahead, and that was for information that anyway, and they already have the list of things that we knew of that we would be inquiring about. So with your acceptance of that, and that we'll start with the Hamilton Waikato Tourism going on to the police. So we're following the order on the run sheet rather than the numbered order. So I'll move Councillor Bunting seconds. Any discussion on that? If not, those in favour, against, that's carried. Public forum, as far as I'm aware, we have no public forum. No one's signified. So we're right on to Hamilton and Waikato Tourism. We've got Jason Dawson and Annabelle Cotton. Sorry, Gary. Yeah, declarations of interest, any? No, good. I've discussed a potential one with one member, and that's not necessary, so we're all sweet. Okay. Hamilton Waikato Tourism, Jason Dawson and Annabelle Cotton. Annabelle's the chair of Hamilton Waikato Tourism. They're going to present from up here. And councillors, you've all been sent or received a copy of the presentation, I believe. Have you? I've certainly been sent it electronically. So you can follow it on the screen or on your papers or whatever. So Jason and Annabelle, welcome. Over to you, thanks.
Kia ora, good morning, councillors. Thank you for making time for our update. So this is our 6-monthly update from June last year through to December last year as well. I'm happy to give you any sort of updates on the latest statistics based on where we are today as at end of March, because there are some changes in some of the initial data that you have been presented. So first up, we have 7 KPIs, key performance indicators, with each of our 7 local government funders around what we will deliver for the region over the coming year. As you will see, for visitor nights, we have a 5% increase year on year on total guest nights versus the national rate. As at end of December, we only achieved a 0.2% growth rate compared to 2.6 national. As of end of March, the latest data, we are at 2.4 and national was at 2.2. So again, we do always traditionally see a drop off in percentage growth rate around Christmas time, when most people actually go back and actually holiday in other parts of our country, and then they start to return again once business starts in February. So again, we do see that bounce back going on. Visitor spend, so again, we're achieving very, very well for the region. 6% growth compared to last year, bringing in 1.557 billion into the region through visitor expenditure, domestic, international, and through commercial accommodation. Conventions and business events, so we have a target of achieving a 10% growth rate for business events, board meetings, conventions and exhibitions. We achieved a 10.4% growth rate based on the previous 6 months. Visitor awareness and perceptions, that's when we go out there into the market locally and domestically and actually ask about their favourability to visit our region, and we measure that in June, so we will update you at the end of year report on that one. Digital engagement, that's where we measure referrals, so not just people that click and view our website, it's actually referrals through to our operators and actually bookings. We achieved an 11.6% engagement rate, which is fantastic. Average engagement rates online normally between 6 to 7. Industry investment, so we increased the target of how much funding we actually achieved from our industry of 450,000. As at end of the year, we achieved 291. As of today, we've achieved over 400,000. So we're well on track to achieve that 450,000 target by the end of financial year. And then lastly, return on investment. So for every council dollar that's invested into our activity, we're returning $1,260 back into the region. We're also undertaking a current piece of work where I'm benchmarking us against other regional tourism organisations so that we can put some sort of criteria around it and a bit of context. So that way our councillors across the region can actually see, are we getting a good return? Based on Rotorua, Bay of Plenty, Taupō, Coromandel and a few other key metro tourism agencies as well. So we'll be able to present that in our annual report. How the region is doing, I've touched on it with regards to our visitor expenditure, still significantly growing. Domestic is our number one visitor, sitting around 70% of our visitor market. They're bringing in nearly 1.2 billion, with international visitors 362. Commercial guest nights are starting to plateau, as in growth. Occupancy levels are high across all our hotels, and again, we have this regular discussion around the need or desire for Hamilton to have at least another 2 commercial large-scale hotels in our city to meet demand. International visitor arrivals, you would see a lot of press in the media around the China market and how it is starting to slow. Many people are obviously linking that potentially to the Huawei decision. What we are seeing is traditionally the China market do drop off. We do get a bit of a peak during Chinese New Year, but again, the long-term forecast for China is still strong. We will still meet the projected growth rates, but we will increase the value rather than the volume out of our Chinese visitors. And domestic guest nights are sitting around 6% for the region, which is a good place to be. So how is the city doing? Because obviously that's why we're here. Your growth rates are actually quite significant compared to other parts of the region who are sitting around 2% growth. You're at 4.7 annual visitor growth spend compared to last year. 712 million from domestic, so again still a strong domestic destination. And lastly, 200 million coming into the city from international visitors. And again, that's from July through to December last year. Guest nights, again, you're starting to plateau. Again, it's not because people are not staying here, it's just that the lack of capacity within our current inventory for hotels is meaning that occupancy levels are high, including some of the new hotels that are coming on stream, but we just need to grow that capacity a bit more to see that percentage growth. But people are staying longer, so around 2.1 average night stay, whether you're a business traveller or a leisure traveller into Hamilton. Airbnb, again, you would have seen, congratulations Hamilton on winning the #1 summer destination on Book-a-Batch. Again, the events that we have in our city, such as the Sevens, we also had the World Track Champs at the Avanti Drome, we had Sound Splash, Hamilton Gardens Arts Festival, Balloons Over Waikato. They generate a lot of commercial accommodation activity, but also non-commercial, such as Airbnb. So as at December last year, you were sitting at around 535 active listings as a city. 39% of those listings are actually full homes. So these are people actually potentially what we call going on holiday, getting out of the city or going to Bali during winter and actually listing their home, because what we do see is this big fluctuation during seasons around people listing their full homes on Airbnb. From July this year, we will have a full year's data with regards to Hamilton, and we can start to look at trending and forecasting of how we expect the non-commercial accommodation sector to hopefully ease the burden of demand during major events. Your annual rental growth rate on Airbnb is around 151%, so good returns there, and occupancy is sitting around 70%, which is something from a RevPAR perspective, from a commercial accommodation provider, that you would want to achieve. So Airbnb is actually servicing the city well at the moment. With regards to international conferences and business events, this is inside your report as well. Of course, we always like to report on the wins and the pendings, but what I wanted to quickly highlight is we are starting to lose international conferences here. So the last one I've just put at the bottom there is the World Urban Parks Asia Pacific Region Conference. It was between us and Rotorua, 400 delegates into the city over 4 days. Again, the reason they did not choose Hamilton was due to our lack of large-scale commercial accommodation. They wanted to house the 400 delegates within 2 hotels in our city, within walking distance of Claudelands, which is where was the venue that we were bidding. So look, Claudelands was definitely seen from the venue perspective as better than Rotorua's, but when it came to commercial accommodation here for the city, we are starting to lose bids as well. So I just wanted to, we track those, because again, we need to know why do we lose. We don't like to lose, but we want to know what those are and potentially what are some of the things we can do to prevent it for the future. With regards to international and domestic marketing, obviously we launched our new regional visitor brand. Rather than me talk about it, here's hoping it works. I will just quickly play our 90-second video of the new brand. Oops, hopefully it doesn't buffer.
Come with us, share our waka, and feel our strength and passion. For this is a place beyond the expected, which constantly surprises, with natural beauty, powerful history, and out-of-this-world experiences. Always far from the ordinary, this is a magical region of villages to play, relax, connect, and explore in. Here, our kaitiaki runs deep, our mana inspires, and unforgettable discoveries are just around the bend. A welcoming place where our people keep it real and experiences become unreal. This is the mighty Waikato. It's all yours to discover.
So the new regional visitor brand was 2 years' work, where we actually interviewed and researched a lot of what we call our drive and fly markets, our domestic market, particularly Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, and our locals, around what they feel and what sorts of terms and words and experiences would they describe when they visit our region. It was great. Sorry. Spooky. It was great to see that the mighty Waikato came through, so that is our brand that we've adopted. It is in our DNA as a region, but the good thing about that is it's something that we deliver on the promise. Where magic runs deep, we're part of the values people found when they visited us, so they found we were authentic, magical and surprising. So we've done a soft launch of this to our industry and to all our local government funders in December, and we're now starting to execute and roll that out through all our brand and through our campaigns over the coming 12 months. Also the board are looking at, with regards to our organisation, whether we adopt a trading name to better reflect the mighty Waikato brand and more of our activities that we are doing. As mentioned, we're doing more than tourism now. We're obviously involved in the business event sector with regards to conferences and convention bids that we work with the H3 team on as well for the city, as well as major events coordination. We do some support bidding for major events now for the region, and also destination development, where we have someone on board for the last 3 years that has actually been developing new products and experience for the region as well. Our new brand obviously went straight into print, which is our new visitor guide, to better reflect some of the opportunities and the way we do things. The guide actually went up to 100 pages this year. It is distributed 100,000 copies through all our international gateway airports, through all eyesights around the country, and at all our international trade shows. Oops, I've got Howard Morrison. That's quite cool. Let's just stop Howard. Love to have him there. Another win for us, particularly in the last 6 months, was our domestic marketing campaign. We've been working really hard with Kia Ora magazine to get them to profile Hamilton. Again, it's been missing from Kia Ora for the last 10 years. What we have done is for the last 6 months we managed to achieve 2 travel features where we bring the travel writers here. They did a big story in September about Hamilton on the menus that was showcasing some of the city's eateries, places to drink and things to do. And then also in November we managed to bring them back to actually do a story on the Hamilton Gardens, which was a 5-page feature, as well as profile the upcoming acts that was coming for the Hamilton Gardens Arts Festival. So our goal is literally that we would try and get some sort of more domestic marketing through our national airline at least twice a year. Oops, why do I keep hitting that one? Sorry. International marketing, so again, we do work still quite closely with the rest of our North Island colleagues. I'm currently chair of the Explore Central North Island Marketing Alliance, so that's all those regions up there, Coromandel Bay of Plenty, Tairāwhiti, Taupo, Ruapehu, down to the Hawke's Bay. We market around those two highways you see highlighted, which is the blue one, the Pacific Coast Highway, and our highway, the Thermal Explorer, which actually runs through the city and goes to Waitomo and then continues on down through to Taupo and Napier. So that's around South Drive and also in the North American market particularly. We club together to get better bang for buck. And then lastly, look, industry and product development. There is a lot of things going on in Hamilton that we've been working with a lot of these operators or new operators for. Again, we're all aware that with the crane on the skyline that came up 2 weeks ago, the Novotel Tainui extension. Obviously, we've been supporting and working around the Hamilton Gardens development. The Hamilton Zoo and Waiwhakariki shared entry plaza, which we provided a letter of support for the TIF application. We're working with obviously a lot of the sporting codes, the Chiefs, Waikato Rugby Union and Northern Districts around activating sports tourism opportunities for them, as well as St Andrews Golf Course and eventually some of our other golf courses around the region around pitching for golf. The reason why we're now moving into the golf special sector group is there's a development at Lockhill, as we know, which will create the region's first marquee golf course or 5-star type golf course. So based around that, we are also looking at the Australia market and the Kiwis. The New Zealanders also love to travel in groups and actually experience golf, from marquee golf courses through to some country courses as well, which is great. You've got two, obviously now, or three actually, escape rooms in your city. Confinement, obviously moved to Sky City, and also Escapist just opened recently on Bryce Street opposite the Lido. Waikato Leisure Sports Studies, New Zealand School of Tourism, we're working with them quite hard to grow what we call the pipeline of talent into the city. New Zealand School of Tourism have launched a Level 6 diploma, which we've been actively involved in as well, developing, and Waikato Leisure of Sports, WILS as it's known, is based out at the University of Waikato, is around getting people into event management. So again, our organisation has been involved in trying to build and attract people into tourism long term. Of course, the Waikato Regional Theatre is still hot on our agenda as a game changer for the city, so we have supported Calvin, Momentum and the Council with regards to their PGF application, so hopefully we should know soon. And then lastly, the Waikato Museum, their new product, which is a walking tour for 1 hour around a history of the city, goes around. I filmed it last night. We'll be launching that with the museum on the 14th of May. Again, it'll be run 3 times a week to begin with, and then eventually we hope it'll become quite a big commissionable product for the city as well. International Visitor Levy, this is definitely of interest. We're working really hard with Local Government New Zealand to try and ensure the government release the International Visitor Levy back to the regions. So 50% of the International Visitor Levy that will be collected at our borders is earmarked for tourism. Rather than it going into contestable fund, MB have agreed that they would try and send it to the regions, and at the moment what they're looking at is regions who have a destination development plan. Luckily for us as a region in 2016, we have that plan. We're quite clear on what we want to do within our cities and districts that would be game changers. So we will we'll still work with Local Government New Zealand to see how MB will look at delivering that funding into regions, but hopefully we want it at local government level, which is why we're working with Local Government New Zealand to try and access some of that long-term funding. And then lastly, a major initiative in the tourism industry last year, which we're working on promoting from this year, is the Te Aki Promise. Again, I won't talk too much about Te Aki, and lastly, just play this video, hopefully. Oops.
Rangi Nui is our Sky Father.
Ko tāne mahuta, nāna te ngahiri.
Tāne Mahuta is our forest.
Oops.
Ko papa tuānuku e takoto nei.
Papa Tuanuku is our Earth Mother.
Ko Tangaroa, nāna te moana, ki usa. Ko ngā awa me ngā roto.
Tangaroa is our ocean, our rivers, our lakes.
Ko Aotearoa tō tātou ukai.
New Zealand is our home. It is precious. Everyone who lives and travels here has a responsibility to look after it.
Te Aki means to care for people and place. The Te Aki promise is a commitment to care for New Zealand, for now and for future generations.
To care for land, sea and nature, treading lightly and leaving no trace.
To travel safely, showing care and consideration for all.
To respect culture, travelling with an open heart and mind.
While travelling in New Zealand, follow the Te Aki promise. Act as a guardian.
Protect and preserve our home.
Help us care for New Zealand.
Oops. Sorry, so the Te Aki Promise is an education program. It's around educating our international visitors before they land on our shores, around the way that we do things as a country. A lot of this you would have seen potentially rolled out with our responsible camping program that we did over summer this year to address some of the freedom camping issues. Road safety, we work with NZTA around obviously driving on the correct side of the road and where to pass correctly. So Te Aki is based around 5 principles that we teach our visitors. So all our operators are behind it. They display the posters. They plan all our eyesights at the moment. All the staff at eyesights wear Te Aki Promise t-shirts. They're on all inbound flights from Air New Zealand for our long haul markets. And also we're working really hard to start to educate and play this within for everyday New Zealanders. As you know, look, it's great to have a promise. It's very similar to the Icelandic code of care, and in Chile they have a care code as well, but it's actually around the way New Zealanders do things. As an international visitor, when they're here, if they see us driving erratically or overtaking on dangerous places, if they see us throwing away rubbish out of our vehicles, then actually, as you know, you normally follow that. You expect that's the behaviour of their country. So for us, even though Te Aki is an important opportunity for us to develop the most sustainable tourism industry, we also need to work with our New Zealand community as well to buy into the Te Aki Promise. So that's it for the end of my presentation, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks. And councillors, following our principle of going fast, one lot of questioning per councillor. Not one question, but don't come back for a second go. Paula first, thanks.
Thank you, Chair Dave. I've actually just got 3 short questions, if that's okay. Now, the first one relates to what you acknowledged, and we've acknowledged many times in this chamber, which is the connection between events and accommodation. And I'm wondering what your perspective is. Sean has presented to us on this topic a number of times, so we are appraised of it. But I've heard in the pipeline, I'm sure you have, there's going to be a hotel here or there or somewhere else, but this has not eventuated in the shortest period of time. It's a chicken and an egg, though, isn't it? How do we break that chicken and egg cycle? We need the hotel, and when then you talk to potential hotel investors around town, they say they need consistency over the year, a certain room occupancy averaged. So they're not good with, oh, well, we're all full for January, February, March, and we're all empty for July, August. I'm just making that up. But that kind of principle, they're saying we have to have a base to invest very expensive in hotels. They have to pay. How do we overcome that? How do we go forward? Because I feel like I've been hearing that now for, I'm sure you do too, 3 or 4 years. Have you got any suggestions on that one?
No, look, I think council have done very well. I mean, you've invested in a hotel investment prospectus about 3.5 years ago. You've updated that about 1.5 years ago. We do have big national and international operators actually come into the region. So as far as the international hotel operators are concerned, look, the numbers are good. I don't think we can tell any better story. We actually are a city that actually bounces through seasonality, so that's kind of what you were discussing. Actually, our winter season and our shoulder seasons, our region is still quite busy, and that's mainly due through to business business events and conferences, and through major events like field days, which actually we do have in the middle of our winter. So the leisure market is a key part of the commercial accommodation drive, but at the moment it's mainly the corporate and business market that's actually driving the demand. So I don't think council could actually do any more than what you have already done. The numbers are quite clear. I think you hopefully will hear in the next few months some developers that will actually announce their intentions. Obviously, you know, Ian Castles has come to the city from Wellington, runs the Wellington Development Company. He's currently, the scaffolding started to go up this week around the old IRD building, so he is converting that into a 75-room hotel. Wyndham Group have obviously taken over the old Sedema Hotel, the old commercial on the corner. Again, it's been sitting there with all these great plans for 2.5 years and nothing has happened. But you'll see the screens again have gone up last week and the development net will start on that. Refurbishment has already begun in the rooms. So what we are seeing is, look, retrofitting is actually more affordable for a developer. Obviously, to do a greenfield site in our city can be expensive, particularly if it is close to the river. But if they were to take current buildings and actually retrofit them into hotels, what we do see is there is a higher appetite for that at the moment. But as you know, we don't have a lot of large-scale commercial buildings sitting vacant right now. That actually we
those
could,
will be what, three, four star, or two and a
ideally
half, three?
4-star.
Four-
Oh, the new ones
The
coming
ones
on
that you've
stream.
mentioned,
So the Wyndham is converting to a 4-star, and Ian Castle's property will be 4-star as well. So it's a 4-star minimum.
Well, that's some good news in the week, isn't it? Question about the Airbnb. This came up during our long-term plan. We had a submission from the Hospitality Sector Association, and we didn't really actually deal with it at the time for some reason in the busyness. But they suggested that we look at policies such as Auckland and Queenstown, Rotorua have a policy.
Coromandel, yes.
As Coromandel. Around where it's commercial and where it's non-commercial. And you talked about complete houses being, you know, there are some houses out there that are permanently being used
Correct.
for Airbnb. Do you think a policy around commercial rating, not putting them out of business, because obviously they're meeting demand, but do you think that's something that we should be looking at?
Look, so Waikato District Council is the only council I know of right now within our region that actually are looking at some sort of policy for next year. Again, that will be around if a property is rented more than 15 days a year, it is classed as full commercial. They will be charged full commercial rate, but again, that's still to be debated. And also Queenstown, as you've seen, Mayor Jim Bolt has been quite public around some sort of bed tax for Queenstown lakes. Again, that is another potential opportunity that local government can look at. So look, LGNZ are all over this. They are looking at different ways to enable councils to address the non-commercial accommodation growth plus fund future infrastructure. So I would say, look, there's hopefully more information will be available by the end of the year that you can look at.
Okay, so I'll just raise that, Mr Chair, question to staff whether, when and how we could bring that discussion to the table, because it pretty much did get overlooked in the long-term plan. It was a submission, but we didn't really.
For that at least the annual plan meeting you raise it. In fact, raise it in advance with Sean Hickey to get it on some sort of list of potential consideration, recommendation.
Well, I'd like to keep track with what other people's thinking are, so we could be, you know, on side with it. Last question, sorry. Thank you for those great videos. Really love them, and the Tiaki one in particular is nice, it's fresh. I just really enjoyed it. Where does this sit within the Waikato story and that bigger picture of economic development, Te Waka stock of information? There's some similarities through it, so is it something that's on that site as well? Does it work in conjunction with the economic video of our region? How does that fit in?
Yes, it does. So how it works is, I call it that we have like a story hierarchy for the country. So the New Zealand story has obviously was created during the Rugby World Cup. That is our national story about telling us who we are as a country. Underneath that is the Waikato story, which tells our regional story, and we are a chapter of the Waikato story. So you would have seen similarities in some of the language and the words that we used. Again,
Yes,
we shared the research because we used the same research company that was done for the Waikato story. So again, it is around ensuring all our stories are aligned. So the tourism chapter is now live, as you've just seen now. The next chapter we're working on with the Waikato story is education, and then also investment. So again, there'll be similar stories that all fit under the umbrella of the Waikato story.
Oh, good. Thank you for that. And just through you, Mayor Dave, we, not in the time that I've been in council, but previous council did something around a Hamilton story, and it might be Could we see some information about that, where's that's going, and is that being refreshed as a more local story as well?
We'll ask Jen to talk about that offline to work out.
Yeah, so it's a question to cover
Yep,
off.
thanks.
Thank you.
Mark, please.
Thank you, briefly. So the bed tax, would you support an Airbnb bed tax, knowing how tight accommodation is at the moment? Not trying to lead your answer at all.
I think it's completely up to council how you wish to address that. I think if you develop more commercial accommodation, then there would be not a reliance as much on Airbnb.
Right.
And actually, price comparisons when you're starting to see what some of the properties are being listed, it's actually more cost effective to stay in our motels on Ulster Street with full service, or in some of our hotels here. So again, price will always drive the demand as well.
Yeah, sure. And then Airbnb has really no effect on the conference market, does it? Quite too separate.
A little bit. Look, corporates mainly actually want commercial accommodation.
Yeah.
They expect 4 to 5 star hotels. So if they're travelling in other parts of the world or the country, that's where they will stay. Most corporates will not be putting up 100 delegates in Airbnbs around a city.
Yep.
It depends on this type of organisation. So.
Cool. Now, I really enjoy your presentations, and there's one question I need to ask each time, is that you say for every dollar spent, we bring in about $8 gazillion. Can you explain how that works? How do you measure that? And what
Yep,
that
so
means?
for every dollar of council money invested, that's across all our 7 councils of the region.
Right.
We then base it on ratepayers, so how many ratepayers are in your region.
Yep.
So we divide it by that, and we add literally the visitor expenditure for the city and the region, plus the amount of people that are staying in commercial guest nights in the region. So that's where that figure comes from. But again, as you'll see, I talked about benchmarking, so we can put a bit more context around that, so you know that hopefully we are delivering as well compared to other regions.
Right,
So-
and that stacks up pretty well against the other regions.
Yes, it's double the amount of other regions, so it's good to see some of. We want to report that, so you can actually see a bit more benchmarking.
Thank you. And finally, the event space, you listed off a really great bunch of events which, you think drove the Airbnb or the best summer destination thing. My worry is a dearth of them, a lack of them in winter. We've got field days, obviously, but does that concern your organisation, that we kind of have nothing happening over winter, so we do have those peaks and troughs?
Yep, so what we did last year is we launched the major event strategy, so that was another 12-month project around trying to grow major events in our region, or particularly in the city, in our shoulder seasons. So things like the World Darts that are coming, and it's actually in August.
Yep.
We've got 2 other new events that we're looking at to actually bring into the city that we're working with some of the event promoters for around September, and of course bringing back an All Blacks test in September as well. So our idea is for the region, our summer season is full. So for future major events, we want to target shoulder and winter. So to try and buffer that and create and just address the seasonality demand we have.
Good to hear. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Gary, please.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jason. And I'm not sure if Mark has already asked this question, but on page 19, Mark you asked the question about return on investment. Is that the question you were? Okay. So can you, just to be quite clear, that means, and you said dividing by ratepayers and things like that. You're saying there that $1 invested in
Us.
Hamilton Waikato tourism generates $1,270
Return.
Okay.
Correct. And that's only based on visitor expenditure and commercial guest nights, so people staying in hotels, motels, holiday parks.
Okay, so it doesn't include, for example, the people going to Hobbiton, people going to the rugby games.
Yes, it does, because literally if they spend while they are here, which normally they would, whether it be for transport or accommodation or F&B, we capture that. We do clip the ticket.
So that implies that there's a direct cause and effect, that if we put $1 in, we'll get $1,270 back, which suggests that if you put $1,000 in, we get $1.2 million back.
Correct.
But that pays no attention to the fact that there's millions of dollars of stadiums, millions of dollars of investment in hotels that is not in the denominator,
Correct.
in the numerator. Yeah.
That's right.
So it's with all due respect, it's not a useful.
Gary, I don't want to debate
Still
the
in it.
methodology. He's explained it, and you can agree or
Yeah,
disagree.
well, okay, I just think it's a fault, and I've raised it a number of times. Every time I will raise it again, because I just think it's a mislead. I'm not saying you're trying to cheat or lie or anything, but it's just a misleading.
But it is Gary and apples with apples in terms of the other tourism organisations. Making the same comparison enables us to compare our investment.
So
with
we're
other
all
places.
living in a bubble then, and I thought it was
Probably,
just
yeah.
us, but everyone's living in the same bubble.
It's not for us to debate that methodology here.
Well, it is, because it's our ratepayers' money that's going in, and we're being advised that $1
No,
in
I'm
here.
suggesting this report from them is not the time to debate it. Of
course it's when is the time to debate it?
Gary, the time to debate that is when we're asked to put an investment at LTP times.
Well, no, the time now is when the report comes to us and we've got visibility.
Sorry, Gary.
You know you're wrong, and you're trying to stop this question.
You can think I'm wrong, and I'm stopping the question, that line of question, thanks.
Just in response as well, we are looking at this with all our tourism partners and local government New Zealand, because again, as you've seen from some of these are quite generic indicators that pretty much every tourism agency in New Zealand use with their government partners. Yeah. But we want to make sure that we do have correct data and insights, which is obviously driven through the government, to make sure that we are providing more effective measures. So that's something that we will be discussing coming into our next financial year's activities, because again, some of these, 5% increase on growth, 5% increase here, well, that's great, but how do we make sure that they actually are more meaningful and accessible type measures that we should be measuring our performance against? So definitely the ROI one is something that we have raised nationally.
Because clearly I, as one person around this table, think that's a very misleading figure.
And that's right. And it looks
hang on. No, I don't want an answer, and I don't want any more questioning on that, because the time to discuss that is when we discuss our investment in this area.
You're wrong again, Dave.
We understand the method. Okay, I'm wrong, and you have recourse if you wish to disagree with the chair's ruling and put a procedural motion. But otherwise, we move on to the next question. Thanks, Gary.
Oh no, that's me.
Okay, thanks. Māngai Norm.
Nei te miki a koe mo tēnei whakamarama nei. Just wanted to acknowledge the Cultural River Symposium at Don Rollins, and thank you for your contribution there. Just 3 quick questions. What impact do you think the role or the name, advancing the name of Hamilton Kirikiriroa would be with regards to the brand? What role do marae in and around Kirikiriroa have with regards to accommodation? And just a quick status update on the feasibility of the PGF fund around tourism.
So first up, Kirikiriroa Hamilton. So obviously it depends on the market that we're actually working in, whether we use the words Hamilton or Waikato, or whether we use Kirikiriroa and Waikato Tainui. So for them, for international markets, again, it's all around New Zealand. People actually do not know our place names. They actually come to New Zealand and they're drawn, and they travel based on the attraction. So again, they know us for Hamilton Gardens, they know us for Hobbiton. So it is hard. In the domestic market though, we are starting to use a lot more te reo Māori with regards to our place names, and we do use that with regards to our tour operators. So we're starting to educate them, like this new Waikato walking tour that we actually went on yesterday. It was explaining, what are the origins of the city, what were the pre-European history that we have here, and why is the city really called Kirikiriroa? What does that mean? So some of that you'll start to see through our experiences. So that's hopefully answered that question. The second one was about activating marae around Hamilton. So for us, look, we have worked a lot with a lot of the local marae across Waikato. It is quite hard to ensure that they can accommodate people regularly. If we are getting coach groups in who want to stay on marae, they actually do need to be open and prepared to host, which is always hard, as you know, with most of our working marae here. We're at Mangatauteri on the weekend with Tourism New Zealand. Again, it's a working marae. They had to move hui. There was, luckily there was no tangi. So our problem with, our challenge working with marae is to ensure we actually, if we are going to provide marae accommodation or marae experiences, they actually do have to be aligned to tourism. But look, we have had discussions actually quite fruitfully with Fairfield College, because obviously they're a school marae. It is pretty much empty at night outside of events, so we are looking at some school marae. We've talked and discussed some opportunities with Wintec marae. So again, any sort of marae that potentially we could use for tourism activity can be more attractive and actually more beneficial without upsetting the kaupapa of a working marae. So. And sorry, what was your last question?
Oh, it's just around the PGF fund around.
Oh, the
tourism.
PGF funding, yes. So as far as I'm aware, we are still, it has not been submitted yet. I haven't had an update since Harvey Brooks has left Te Waka, so I'm catching up with Michael Bassett-Foss next week, so hopefully we'll know a bit more about where that application's at.
Good point.
Thanks. Siggy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jason, for that. Look, I love your video. It's awesome. Question with the Tiaki promise, and it's wonderful and sounds and looks beautiful. And we expect a whole lot of things from our visitors. And like you said, how are you going to make the locals drive better and behave better and all that, you know? So how is that going to work together?
So that's still what we're discussing with the government, because again, the tourism industry have taken the lead to say we will lead the international and domestic visitor space with regards to educating people on Tiaki or visiting New Zealand. So it's now with the government around what, because MB are at the table and Ministry of and the Tourism New Zealand, around how they will try and activate that with our locals, whether that be through our locals visiting our experiences. But eventually what we do see is Tiaki rolling out through what we call the whole supply chain of tourism, through to retail, hospitality, where potentially you will have table talk cards on every cafe table talking about Tiaki, which is what we have in tourism operators right now. So it's actually taking some of that collateral into where New Zealanders go as well. So that's where we see the next stage of Tiaki going.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Leo, thanks.
About a week ago, I think it was, we had a presentation here from a group called Haka. Have they been in contact with your organisation?
Yes, so we have worked with Craig and Leanne Munns from Taonui Waka
Okay.
Tourism for many years, an Aotearoa experience. They are what we call the Māori tourism agency to try and help and support and foster cultural tourism in the region. Haka is something that obviously they've briefed you on, that has been run here in the city at Hamilton Gardens, normally during the Gardens Arts Festival. But we see, we are co-funded with them and a few others, Waikato Tainui, in a feasibility study for the Haka program, and literally it did come through with some options to try and make it a commercially feasible product. So, yes.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, thanks very much, councillors. I'll move that the committee receives the report, seconded by James. No discussion. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for coming. We're always interested in HWT reports.
Yes, thanks.
Right, we're going to move on to the next presenter, who is here. Where is he? Oh, there's Marcus here. The New Zealand Police Road Policing Update. That's on page 36. And Inspector Marcus Lynham. Marcus is pretty well known to us by now. And we had a good discussion yesterday at the Regional Transport Committee, which no doubt will get replicated here, Marcus. So I'm going to leave the floor to you to introduce it, and then I'm pretty sure there'll be questions from councillors. Thanks.
Thank you. Is this microphone? Yep.
Yep.
I'll try and give it a Hamilton flavour from yesterday's meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I enjoy being on this particular spot here and having challenging questions. So the purpose of me here is just give you a brief update on priorities of the New Zealand Police and Waikato Police, and also give you the opportunity to ask me any questions and also highlight any risks and issues that you have that you'd like to bring to my attention. Before I start, though, I'd like to just acknowledge a few people in this room, my ex-colleagues from the New Zealand Police, Jim and Leo, and also Paula, who I know well, and also acknowledge yourself, Dave, with the work that you do in the RTC. I think you represent Hamilton City Council really well on there and have a strong road safety focus, so thank you for that. New Zealand Police have a high-level strategic target of a 5% reduction in deaths or road fatality crashes each and every year. So that's something that was new, that was added on at a strategic level for the New Zealand Police in the middle of last year. 5% reduction in deaths each and every year. Up until a few months ago, we were actually doing quite well, but there's been a horror month lately with multiple fatalities. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, it's not in the Waikato. The Waikato district is actually doing quite well at the moment, with a year-to-date of 35% reduction in fatalities.
Can you explain the boundary issue that you did yesterday?
Yeah, the Waikato Police District is different to the Waikato Regional Council. Our boundary finishes south at Pairiri, the intersection of State 29 and State 1. So South Waikato, Taupō, which is part of the Waikato District Council, is not part of the police area. That's part of the Bay of Plenty. So those fatalities down there aren't part of the Waikato Police District. So we're currently sitting at 13 fatalities for the Waikato Police District compared to 20 this time last year. But any number of fatalities on the road is unacceptable, and the priority or the purpose of Road Policing Group and wider New Zealand Police is to prevent death and serious injury crashes on our network. For Hamilton City, I have 10 staff who are dedicated for Hamilton City, that their sole purpose is to prevent death and serious injuries on Waikato roads. That's dedicated road policing staff. Obviously, there's a lot more staff which have other wider roles and responsibilities, which also include road safety, but I have 10 dedicated staff. To achieve that 5% reduction each and every year, we cannot do that alone. The safe system is quite clear that it's everyone's responsibility, and I'd like to acknowledge also Robin Denton and the team that you have here at Hamilton City Council, and yourselves and the leadership you guys play, and girls, on road safety, particularly on this safe speed program that you're leading for the Waikato District, with significant reductions in your speed around residential areas and around schools, and further work you're doing there. Also, some of the engineering solutions that you've been putting in place around cycling, pedestrian crossing, and the recent Thomas Gordonton Road intersection, and also the education programs that you've committed to, and particularly the Right Track, which the O'Tumans are heavily involved with. So I believe Hamilton City Council is doing a really good job when it comes with the focus and leadership around road safety. So I thank you for that. A few stats around our priorities and to achieve that 5% reduction is what we refer to as RIDS. The evidence is clear that if we can focus on 4 key areas on road safety, we'll have the biggest impact on reducing death and serious injuries on our roads. First one is restraints. The evidence is 25% of all fatality crashes, a person was not wearing a seatbelt. Their life may or may not have been saved, but 25% of those that die on the road aren't wearing a seatbelt. So I haven't got the Hamilton City specific stats, but for my Waikato police team, we issue about 400 restraint infringement notices every month in the Waikato. 400 a month. It's unbelievable that people these days don't take that second. Very simple, just to make a click and put their seatbelt on. So there is still a lot of people. A large majority of those are in rear seat passengers, more so than drivers, but yes, it's 400 a month. The other focus area for us is impairment, and impairment includes drug, alcohol and fatigue. So there's 3 parts to that. Alcohol represents 22% of all fatalities. Drugs represent 24% of all fatalities, and fatigue 19%. And our monthly prosecution rate for drink driving, which is by far the largest of the 3 types, is 210 a month. So we prosecute either through a low-level infringement or through the courts, 210 people in the Waikato for drink driving. We ran an operation in December, Operation Tri-Cities, where we bring Rotorua police over, and over 2 nights we breath tested 10,881 drivers in Hamilton City, so it was a Hamilton City operation. 354 of those had evidence of alcohol on their breath, and 77 which is quite a pleasing number compared to previous years. 77 were over the limit, which represents 1 in 141 drivers were over the limit. The third component of RIDS, our focus area, is distraction, and the legislation has a specific distraction offence, which is using a cell phone. There are a wide number of distractions when you're driving, but with cell phones, distraction represents 19% of our fatalities, and we issue roughly about 200 infringement notices a month in Hamilton, in the Waikato for using a cell phone. We find that we see a lot more people using their cell phones when we're driving our own private cars than we're driving police cars. And the final one is speed. 31% of all fatalities is speed related, and we issue approximately, on average, 2,800 speeding notices a month in the Waikato for people exceeding the speed limits. So that's our 4 priority areas, and I think I will just stop there and open for any questions.
Great, thanks, Marcus. Gary, first up.
Thank you, Marcus. Your goal is reducing fatalities on the road. That's a pretty. It's not a measure that's as far as I can see, it's not a measure that's well informed. My point is that shouldn't there be some sort of analysis also of the number of kilometres travelled? So I would have thought you want to have, and I don't know how you get the number of kilometres travelled, but you know that the death rates on the roads is how many kilometres are being travelled, how many people are driving, all that sort of stuff. So it's not a apples versus apples comparison, is it?
No, I agree. I've got. I can speak on that.
Okay, good.
Briefly, we've had some research done, and very briefly, the conclusion was that they would expect a higher fatality rate in the Waikato than we actually have, because of some of those factors you just mentioned.
If you measured that there is an increase in kilometres travelled.
So over the past 10 years, and this is the stats are 10 years up to 2018. Yeah. This is just for New Zealand. There's 5.7 billion more kilometres travelled per year than there was 10 years ago.
And that's a doubling or a 20% increase, or a?
That's from 40 billion to 46 billion kilometres per year. Okay. So it's a significant
I would
increase.
think that would be a more useful metric to
there is measures like that, but that's there's a number of risk factors also. We've got 600,000 more people. 600,000 more people over the last 10 years. There's 600,000 more vehicles on our road than there was 10 years ago. There's 1,000 kilometres of more roading network in New Zealand than there was 10 years ago. Over the last 4 years, there's 100,000 more trucks on the road than 4 years ago, and trucks is a significant higher risk for fatalities. There's 8,000 more motorbikes on the road.
So Marcus, does that suggest that, not that anyone wants to downplay the tragedy of the deaths we're having, but in fact it's not such a big blip up if you divide it, because that's just how many people were killed in 365 days. What you're saying is, in those 365 days, there was all those things you just said then increased. So in fact, the number of deaths, whilst incredibly tragic, is not such a huge spike up. Is that an accurate thing to say?
Yeah, it is accurate. The risks are a lot greater for fatalities. Technology is also improving around the safety of vehicles, so you take that into account. But yeah, because these things are important, because you've got to know what's working and what's not working. And if you're not measuring the right thing, you don't know what's not working and not what is working. Anyway, and the second thing I want to just talk about is, do you want to comment on the multiplicity of different modes of transport and
the concept of separation? Like, I'm old enough to remember when you weren't allowed to ride a push bike on the footpath. Now, I don't know what the rule is now, but everyone rides push bikes. And there's Paxters, and there's skateboards, and there's mobility things. So we've got a transport corridor called the footpath, which is now as busy as a blimmin' motorway. Well, you know, it's exaggerating, but does that come into your brief?
It's more a legislative thing and around the rules and regulations, which the NZTA cover. Our primary role is around enforcement and education, not so much on. Yeah, there's not much I can say around that because it's more common sense. You'd expect that separation. Separation will enhance safety.
But wearing a safety belt's common sense. Not driving drunk is common sense. There's lots of things that are common sense that don't happen. Yeah. Okay. All right. Because we, you know, as with all cities, we are dealing with these new modes of transport, trying to figure out whether they should be on a road or a footpath. Should there be rules involved or not rules involved? Should there be speed limits on bikes and things like that? So
there's no real.
You can't help.
There's no simple answers because there's always.
It just concerns me that we are kind of. It's all flavour of the month sort of stuff, and it's cool if you've got a city that's got Paxters or something on it, but. As we've found out with the Lime scooters, some of these things, there are dangers involved.
Your point's well made. In fact, a couple of those other modes
so you're
coming up later
again?
in the agenda.
Okay, that's the second time.
No, we're looking for questions which were great, but the speech was going on a bit. So you're right there? You finished? Yep. I'm just checking. Okay, Paula, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. The old framework, which was in enforcement, education, engineering. In terms of what we do in the Waikato in our area, what are we lagging in? Is it from your perspective, seeing these horrendous statistics and things, is it more education? Is it, well, I presume from the numbers that you're catching with enforcement, it's not enforcement. You are out there, you are visible. Is it engineering? If so, what kind of mechanisms? Is it the sorts of things that Councillor McPherson has been driving at with slower speeds through areas? What do you do about cell phones, because it's still a big problem? Where do we put our focus?
Yep. My personal view is that the focus is around safe and appropriate speeds. The evidence is clear that 80 to 85% of the New Zealand roading network has a speed limit which is not at a safe and appropriate speed. The international evidence is that that no road should be more than 80 kilometres per hour unless it has a physical separation. Many years ago, whoever designed roads to have two vehicles coming towards each other at 200 kilometres per hour, separated by a bit of paint on the road. If we started from scratch and designing a network, there's no way anyone would think of designing a network where you'd have that situation. So you're having safe and appropriate speeds, and I know the Hamilton City Council leading the way in that regard is really important, but the big gains can be made in identifying those roads that should be at a lower speed limit and identifying those ones which should be engineered up to be able to be driven safely at 100 kilometres per hour. Okay,
that's good. And so is that the same case for the high-speed roads as opposed, and some of the, because I imagine the worst deaths are on high-speed collisions, but there are still incidences on urban roads, yeah? So it would... Yep. Yeah, internal urban roads, intersections, perhaps? Yeah, last year Hamilton City Council had quite a bad year when it came to fatalities. You're currently sitting at 1 for 2019. That was a motorcyclist on Peach Grove Road near Five Crossroads. There was another fatality, but that person died outside the 30-day period, so it's not an official stat. MOT have quite stringent rules to make sure that they compare years to year. So from a police perspective, in the new areas of town, like we're just about to open up a massive growth cell in the south, Peacock, you would like to see the roads designed with safety at the core of the thinking, in terms of not doing more of what you said the same. You wouldn't necessarily design roads like that. Do you think that would be useful, to focus on road safety in the design of the roads? I'm not saying that it isn't, by the way. But.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much, it's a core part of all development thinking these days. So safety is a key element when it comes to road design anyway. So
last
absolutely.
quick question, thanks Dave, and it's just around dogs. You talked about distractions. The increasing number of times I see people with unrestrained dogs, large dogs in the back, which are going to come through and hit you if you have to stop suddenly, but also on their laps, driving with dogs on their laps, and potentially even eating a pie at the same time. You can get all of that happening.
The dog or the driver?
The dog or the driver, sharing the pie. No, but in a serious note, I quite often, especially when I come across Fairfield Road, Fairfield Bridge, I quite often see some people with the dogs on their laps. Is there any...
Move it along, Paula.
Yeah, but no, so what do you do about those types of distractions? Because honestly, that's quite a dangerous missile, a dog.
Yeah, our staff are aware of all distractions, and they'll stop any vehicle that they see someone that is distracted by any way. In the media, it was someone eating their cereal at one stage last year. There's no specific infringement notice for that. It's only cell phones, but an officer can charge someone for careless driving.
So is there no law around having your dog in a doggy seat belt in the back or something? No, so the dog can be loose. Poor dog. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Siggy, please no more dogs.
No more dog questions, no. Look, just a couple of questions. Has the National Police ever entertained the idea of Vision Zero that we in Hamilton adopted? Because that would put a totally different slant on the whole safety thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's, under the current government and the GPS, Ministry of Transport are working on a whole review of safety journeys, and I'm aware of some things, but I can't publicly say, but they are looking down the track, and I think the government has actually signalled that also around Vision Zero. So we're waiting for all the partners to be joined up, but that is something that I totally support.
Cool, thank you. The other thing you talked about, distractions or the causes of death on the roads, and one of them was drugs. Is that legal or illegal or both?
Yeah, the drugs is both. So, and these stats are on fatalities because that's where we get accurate information, because from the post-mortems we can, So
you will find out whether they're on like antidepressants, because there's one of the side effects is...
we have all that
suicide,
details from the post-mortem, so it's, and it's at a level which they deem as causes impairment.
Okay.
So we're not talking about, aspirin and that type of thing.
Okay. I mean, some of these things can happen with heart attacks and whatever on the road as well, isn't it? The other one is, might have missed it. Did you mention foreigners as well? Do they rate highly in the fatalities or not really?
You mean tourists?
Tourists, sorry, tourists, yeah.
Statistically, they don't.
Okay.
They are, like, they can be, they cause crashes, same as New Zealanders, and a lot of people blame certain tourists.
Oh, yeah.
The majority of deaths on New Zealand roads by tourists are Australians.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Mainly because there's a lot more.
Of course,
Australian
coming here. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other distraction, I just want to talk about distraction. In the last few years, we've seen an incredible increase in massive signs around the city, which we've never really had before, and now they're flashing and lightning and whatever else. Is that a distraction? Do you see that as a distraction or not really? Because it's usually around, around traffic lights, so people stop anyway.
Haven't got any evidence that that's causing crashes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff, thanks.
Marcus, you mentioned that drugs have overtaken alcohol in terms of being a contributor towards fatal accidents in the Waikato. I think drugs 24%, alcohol 22%. Yep. And I understand that that's a range of drugs, prescription drugs, all sorts of drugs. Given that factor, where are your enforcement abilities at with drugs? You've obviously still focusing on your drink drive campaigns. You mentioned one before. What are you doing about the people driving with drugs? And how can you detect that? Where's that at?
So we don't have a machine that tests drugs. That requires legislative change. So what all our staff are trained in undertaking SIT tests, which is compulsory impairment tests. So when we stop a vehicle, whether it's a checkpoint, and we breath test them and they pass the breath test, often we can see that, you know, just their demeanour, their eyes, whatever, they are under the influence of something. So we can then require them to complete a SIT test, which is touching your nose, checking their pupils, walking the line. You see, you've probably seen on TV. If they fail that test, then we can require them to give a sample of venous blood through a doctor and have that blood tested for drugs.
So, thank you. So that all seems a bit 1950s to me, that sort of testing. Are we at a stage where we should be looking at something a little bit more, some sort of detailed test, some technological test for that? I mean, are the police asking for that change in legislation? I mean, we're hearing now, just today, that, you know, meths is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. When are we going to catch up with that?
Yep, we should. I agree.
So are the police pushing for legislative change there?
Yeah, we're in discussions with NZTA and our partners in around that, and I believe there's been papers that have gone through subsequent governments, but yeah, it's sitting. That's where it's sitting.
Okay.
It needs a legislative change before we can implement something like that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Mark, please.
Thanks, Marcus. Got a wee range of questions for you. Just I'm interested in the fatigue fatalities. How do you actually attribute a fatality to fatigue, like drugs, alcohol, distraction, easily? But how do you? I've never been able to work that out. How do you do that?
So every fatality is, and the reason why these stats are based on fatalities is because they are heavily investigated.
Yeah.
Any time there's a fatality, we go right back into the history of the driver, right. From days prior, how often they've been sleeping, how long they've been driving for, interview family, friends. So we build up a picture around that. The evidence on the road quite often gives an indication if there is no braking, skid marks on the road. Yep. So there's a number of factors through the evidence that builds up, and often it is quite clear that fatigue is a factor in the outcome because there's no other explanation.
Righto. So is it a growing figure, or because you've had big campaigns on the driver reviver and all that sort of stuff around the place? Is it a big growing issue? Or?
Yeah, I'm not too sure whether it's a growing. I believe it's an underestimate, under-recorded. That's because it is difficult. And not every crash is investigated to that level. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering, as roads get wider, like expressways, and cars get more comfy, you know, and I know it's more dangerous.
Question.
Okay. Is it an area that? Okay, no, don't worry. Move on. Traffins is coming up. I've noticed a kind of a lack of police presence at Traffins in the last few conferences. It's going to be here in Hamilton. We're going to hear like a little public undertaking. You guys are going to be here and into it?
There has been a lack of police coming down to funding, but
right.
Thankfully Traffins is in Hamilton this year. I'm on the organising committee, and there will be Hamilton representation at Traffins. The National Road Policing operations manager attends all trappings, but we don't get representation these days from all the districts.
Because it's real useful. It's
But yeah,
very useful.
I'll definitely be there this year. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Siggy's covered Division 0. Thank you, Siggy. The Regional Transport Authority, I'm hearing rumours that they're talking about us passing over our decision-making about speed limits to the regional councils, etc. Where are the police on that?
The current system doesn't work, I believe. It's it's a clumsy system.
So of councils determining their own speed
councils through a bylaw process, having to consult with the public around it when there's evidence that clearly states what a speed should be on any particular road. And anything we can do to streamline that process, the better.
Okay. So wouldn't passing it over to a regional authority actually just add another layer of faff and slow that process down? Just from 2 years experience.
The difficult thing, not so much for Hamilton City, it's a little bit different, but when you have district councils, how many's in the Waikato? 7, 8 district councils, and you've got NZTA, you have roads that cross all those boundaries, and there has to be coordination between the different councils, because you can't have a person driving down a particular road at the speed limit's 80, then goes into the next council. It's now 100, so getting that coordination and between the councils is quite difficult.
So is there a way, there's the last question on this one, is there a way of doing that without just, I mean, could you just set a set of guidelines that people followed and still could make decisions themselves?
I'd personally like to take the political side out of politics, out of setting of speed limits.
Okay.
My personal view.
Okay, I'll look forward to that discussion further down the track. Okay, with regards to distractions, cell phones in particular, it's quite a common discussion now that our fines are pretty much wet bus tickets when you compare them to even Australia. Is there a move from police to push for stronger retribution for that sort of thing, or bigger punishments?
Yep, they're currently reviewing that down in NZTA, and yep, they're currently reviewing infringements to align better with the risk of crashes.
Yep. And just finally, we've got e-scooters, breathing down our necks. There is some central rules that make it quite difficult for local authorities to get these things onto cycle lanes, for example. And just because of central laws, are police involved in that sort of those discussions? About moving on.
Yeah. They are involved down Wellington. It's not a local decision, though.
Yeah, that's the trouble. Yeah. All right, thanks.
Thanks, James, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Marcus. And the work your road policing staff do is very much appreciated around the city. In fact, I saw my daughter out this morning handing out our ticket to somebody, so she was onto it already. With the crash statistics we do have, there's talk about the causes for that, but in your learned opinion, the biggest cause of crash, is it roading issues or is it driver behaviour?
The cause of the crash comes down often to someone making a mistake, whether it's intentional or just an innocent mistake. So the cause is normally the user. However, we need to ensure we design a system that is so that when a person does make a mistake, it doesn't cost them their lives. Okay, so with our speed reduction policy we've got going here in council at the moment, reducing the speed on our city roads, if an accident happens, will hopefully result in the outcome will be a lesser outcome, and also it gives greater time, a reaction time, so when they do make a mistake, they may have the opportunity to avoid the collision. Yep. Okay. And we've got the Fatal 4 here. They've got the Fatal 5 in Queensland, which is just a little bit different: speed, drink, drug driving, seat belts, fatigue, and distraction, which includes mobile phones, onboard DVD players, which people were watching while they were driving along, and GPS operation. So in their vehicle, while operating the GPS system, having crashes as well. So it reflects quite
with the police here. But I see Superintendent Steve Greeley has announced a road safety week this week. Is it 6 to 12?
Yeah, that's a international road safety week this week, yes. Yeah, and a number of, what comes to mind is Otrahonga Council have done something down there with crosses in the shape of New Zealand. It was in the paper today.
Oh, okay. So have you, I know you've only got a set amount of dedicated road policing units or staff to police the city, but have you been able to deploy any extra staffing in that road policing role for this week?
No, we've had no plans to actually do anything specific for this week. We believe we do our best each and every year. But following from we did have a campaign in February, where we visited every single school in the Waikato district, or 220 something of them, as part of a back to school campaign. So that was our focus for February in the Waikato. So each and every one of the Hamilton schools were personally visited by road policing staff.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Leo, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Marcus, Jeff asked the question about the 1950s drug testing, whereby drugs are making up 24% of the contributing factor in fatalities. To my knowledge, we've been working on this for about 20 years, trying to get some form of drug testing. And I agree, this is going back to the 60s when we actually get people to walk the centre line and all this sort of stuff, you know. So where are we actually at with drug testing? Because it looks like cannabis is going to go through the system at any rate very shortly. And of course that's a gateway drug for other drugs. So has there any progress been made as far as detection for that, for drugs is concerned?
As I said before, we're advocating for a simpler, using the new technology now so that we can do drug testing. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the government and whether they have the appetite for it.
Okay. Restraints. Is there any restraints are actually making up, what was it?
25%.
25%. Surely there's technology out there whereby unless the seatbelt is actually fastened, the engine won't start. Is there any work been done on that, do you know?
I can't really comment on that.
Okay. You mentioned there's 2,800 infringement notices issued for speed. Does that include your speed camera program or not?
No, that's just officer
issued. Yep. Okay, thanks for that. You said you had 10 STU staff in the city. What is the number of road policing staff who actually operate in the Waikato now?
So I have 107 staff. 107? 98 of those are sworn. The other are mobile speed camera operators.
Okay. So then, and then you mentioned the increase in traffic volumes over the last few years. It appears to me that there's been no increase in road policing staff at the same time. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Ta.
Thanks. Norm, please.
Kia ora, thank you for the information. Just a couple of points around restraints, and this is not about dogs on laps eating pies or anything. But I do want to talk just quickly. We heard a presentation earlier around a revolution or a movement around the Tiaki promise to be good behaviours, to be leaderful in our driving and to be an exemplar, I suppose, when visitors come to Aotearoa, Waikato, to follow our behaviours, and I suppose the data doesn't look that good. But I just want to see if there's a correlation between those social deprivation and in terms of restraints and the ability of people to be able to afford their proper restraint seating, especially for mokopuna or young kids, whānau and families who can't afford that. Is there a correlation between restraints and an inability to be able to afford appropriate safe seating for that? And is there, and therefore, if there is a correlation, is there any connection to Plunkett and WINS to help affordability around appropriate restraining mechanisms?
Very good question. There is. So we're talking about child restraints, not
puppies or
adults. There's no correlation there. But for child restraints in particular, there is, and we have a partnership with the Right Charitable Trust organisation. And so for every time an officer stops a vehicle and there may be someone that hasn't got a car seat and they may not be able to afford it, a car seat, we make a referral to the Right Charitable Trust, and they provide a car seat free of charge, no questions asked, to the family. So it's been going for almost a year now in the Waikato, and we've had a great uptake in that.
So it's making positive change in that particular
absolutely.
area?
And, we take a pragmatic view, but when it comes to child restraints around, people may not know how to use them properly, or it's not connected properly. There's a number of infringements that you can give around child restraints, and staff will try look at education first off, maybe give a written traffic warning or give compliance to somebody. So we try and work with the family, because what we want is we want compliance and children restrained properly, rather than penalising people that we may be able to help, rather than have another fine that they have to pay.
Thanks, Max. I had one question relating to intersection accidents, which are one of the higher forms of accident in Hamilton City, not fatal. We have long, as a city, requested the ability to have red light cameras in our city. What's the progress from your point of view towards that, other than just a few in Auckland?
I know Robin and your team here advocate for that significantly with Wellington. It is a national program. It's not something that's decided or have any input at a local level. New Zealand Police there's some work being done on that down in Wellington around who should be involved in red light, speed camera, and whether it is actually an enforcement tool, whether it should sit with the New Zealand Police or whether it should be a network treatment, which should more comfortably with the NZTA. So that's a paper going at the moment. There is no plans around expanding that until that decision is made. So it's more of a wait and see.
Okay, like some of the drugs one. I hope it's not the same 20 years. Anyway, hey, look, thank you very much for coming. As you can see, this whole council is very interested in the subject, and Ryan, who's not here, is the only one who didn't ask questions. So he gets the chocolate fish today. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillors, I'll move that we receive Marcus's report, seconded by Paula. Those in favour, against, gets carried. Thanks. We're going to do the next couple of items before we go to morning tea break. Confirmation of the growth of infrastructure open minutes of 29th of March, which are on page 6, councillors. And I'll move them, and seconded by Mark, Jeff, in this case, best. Are there any questions or clarifications, changes requested? If not, I'll put that. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks. Councillors, on page 33 is the Chair's report. Now, well, it's actually on the following page. Skip the NZTA delegation. I'll repeat that next meeting, because they're not here today. We've had the police updates, and I need to comment on that. The Hamilton to Auckland rail service, which the naming of the train is an issue there, and I've just put up on the screen, just for your information as part of my verbal report, a poll that was held recently, extremely scientific poll, but it did have 1,274 or 54 or something people in it, and that was the result of the choice of 4 names for your interest. Councillors, the next meeting of the committee that's setting the, that's discussing the governance of this project is going to decide the process for this. That's not even decided yet. So this is advanced socialisation of the issue, let's say. Jeff likes that term. That's good. And so there will be, it will come back somehow formally to councils that are involved. We're not sure exactly how yet. The other thing that's happening on the 20th of this month, some of us have been invited from the different councils, invited down to physically look at the refurbishment project at the Woburn Railway Workshops in Lower Hutt. And Chris's report, a general manager's report, you'll see later on a picture of one of the carriages undergoing refurbishment. Nowhere near as good as my picture I might add on this page, but this is only a graphic design, and there can be other variations of names, and the thing that is set though is the silver colour, and that was done to coordinate with the Hamilton buses provided by the regional council, so that's the same family of colour. The name is a different issue that's yet, as I said, yet to be decided, and it will come back at some stage to this council. There's no rush for the name to be decided, but it certainly has created a lot of national attention, and people are discussing what they think of the different names, even on national radio and TV, I'm told. So that's my report. I'll open it to questions. I've got one from Paula first.
Thank you. I heard your points about this isn't the way the name's going to be decided. I've seen quite a few straw polls, and yours included, across the social media space. But how are you going to engage the wider public? How is it through?
Because it's a regional council project officially, they're taking charge, their comms unit is taking charge of that, and they have mentioned focus groups and reference back to each council involved, which is their regional council, our council, and Waikato District and Auckland Council, though they don't seem to want to take part in that side of things.
Because I am favourable to a community-wide approach, but as we know from when we put up our polls on a variety of different things, those don't have any weight. They're just indicative. Maybe they influence public thinking, but maybe they don't. So it'd be interesting if there was a formal social media opportunity for the community to engage.
Look, I did ask the Hamilton City Council comms unit to retweet my poll, but they didn't take up that offer for their formal offer, unfortunately. But I take your point. And look, after the next meeting of our governance group, I will bring, or Chris and I will bring back to this committee, which will be the next meeting, the process, which includes addressing the question you've raised.
Yeah, that would be good, because the Waikato Times also did a poll. Well, they had a story, and the poll was running underneath it in a way, because everybody was
with all the comments,
yeah, with all the comments, but it's capturing that in a way that you can actually give some formal weight to later, and that nobody overly influences it, but the public have a genuine opportunity to think about it.
Yep, point well taken. Leo, thanks.
Just want to say, Dave, on this, your comment about the region's road toll, we didn't talk about it when Marcus was here, but the whole problem is, I notice, is that we're sitting at 38 this time this year compared to 28 this time last year, and Taupo are on 18 for this year compared to 4 last year, 4 in 2017, 3 in 2016 and 1 in 2015. It's a horrific result, sure, but it all comes down to just 3 crashes in which 16 people have lost their lives, which is unusual, most unusual. So hopefully this is just a blip in the system, and hopefully we will settle back down again. But it's very unusual to get that number of people die in just 3 crashes. Normally you get 1 or 2 maybe, and that's it.
And I think
but it's still unacceptable.
Even though it's not in Marcus's region, it's in our region.
It's in our region,
and
sure.
I think one of the points though he made was quite relevant to that. Those 2 high volume crashes in terms of numbers of deaths were both on State Highway 1, in areas where there's no median dividing rope or anything like that, or barrier. So that's just the paint was all that was separating, and that comment was quite important, I thought. We
might remember the 9 that were on State Highway 27 Nauru a few years back too, so they do happen, unfortunately.
Yep, and interesting, on that particular stretch of road, they've now installed barriers on the side, but not down the middle. So they're still not separated. Thanks. So if there's no other points, I'll just move that my report be received, seconded by Mangai Norm. Those in favour, against, carried. Thank you. Councillors, let's break until 10 past. It's about 12 minutes from now. For I was going to say a smoko break. Can't say that now.